and did those to the best of her ability.
Okay. Can we approve all three in one motion?
I would take them individually, actually.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna make the motion to approve item number 1.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, those carry. Now we need a motion for number 2 for the regular council meeting on April 22nd.
I'll make a motion to approve number 2.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Number 3, April 22nd, canvassing board.
So
I'll make a
moved.
motion to approve that.
Okay, sounds like we have a second from Julie.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that carries. Now we go to council, department head, and community board reports.
Anybody have-
I have one. There was a pending open meetings complaint, which dated back to events in prior years. There was a hearing on that before the state commission for open meetings last November, and there was a decision at that time that they would be finding the city of North Sioux City in violation of the posting of agenda requirements. There were 3 agendas that were not posted a full 24 hours before the meeting, which is a requirement under state law, and 1 set of minutes that was posted within the time period that's required, but it went into a folder for a prior year. And so it wasn't in a place where a person would be able to find that if they were looking for the current year. So those violations were noted. There was basically they adjourn to write a written decision. There will be a hearing on Friday to approve the written decision. Subject to there being no objection from the complaining party, I don't plan to do anything other than observe that. We're not resisting at this point in time. They're just meeting on Friday afternoon to approve those decisions. So just wanted to keep you updated that could be something that will be in the news and will be noted, but isn't anything that's new. It dates back to that prior complaint from other years. We will be, as a part of your orientation to the commission, talking about open meeting requirements at a future meeting. We'll do that as kind of an educational presentation, which we did last year as part of our kind of addressing some of those prior past issues. And we'll keep continuing to do that as we go forward and meet the law's requirements for open meetings.
Is there something that can come about because of this? I mean, like, are we in trouble here? Or?
Well, it is a finding that we violated the law. And so other than it being a public censure, no, it is not anything that is a penalty that requires payment of a fine or any other damages. It's just a public finding that we have not complied with those laws. We don't want a record like that. We want a record that we are in compliance with the laws. And so we did include information in that presentation that advised them that we were doing this training. And other than that, no, there isn't any other, what I would say, consequences from that finding.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Jeff, anything on this part?
Well, I just add, this meeting is for not only for you, but for the people watching. This is another meeting to try to bring you all up to speed on and introduce you to some more of the projects that we have in the city, just to give you a higher level of understanding of them, and we'll continue to do that through the course of the month of May.
Okay. Now it is time for community input. So if anyone would like to bring up a concern or an issue, please come up to the podium, state your name and address. All right, looks like we're hearing none there. So we'll move on to the agenda items. First up is McCook Lake Restoration, and this is an update on the Game Fish and Parks project, which was bid April 3rd, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to put this on the agenda so you could, part of the recovery of that area is going to be the McCook Lake restoration. And so I wanted to just give you some insight as to what the Game Fish and Parks is doing as part of an effort to clean up McCook Lake after the June 2024 flood. And also I'd like you to consider an MOU to provide between the state and the city that provides access to the contractor for this project. So with that, I've invited Kelly Connors, who's the contractor with Three Oaks Contracting, and I just invite him up to the front to just give you an update on what that project is, when it's going to happen, and that kind of thing. So.
Hello, and thanks for having me. Three Oaks has a meeting with the Game Fish and Parks on May 12th to kick off the project. It's a pre-construction meeting. After that, we will mobilize to the site, which would be Site 2. Jeff, do you have some plans by chance? Page, probably second or third page. Right there. So we're going to go to the city lot, which would be Project Site 2, and mobilize in there, and that's where I believe the lesser of the amounts, about 3,000 cubic yards, needs to come out there. We're going to excavate and remove, and then we're going to make water for our barges to come in. And our barges will be mobilized on approximately June 1st. And at that time, we'll set them in the water, put an excavator on it, and begin to remove the material that cannot be reached from the shoreline on Site 1. There's, I think, 16 areas or debris areas that they have identified that we need to go out and get. The state understands that there's likely more, but I believe they have in their budget to extend past that as we find things that they will allow us or direct us to go get more. Banner and Associates is representing the Game Fish and Parks. They'll be on site daily to work with us as we identify items and say yay or nay on take it or get it. I'm not exactly sure what that budget looks like for them above and beyond the contract amount. However, we're going to work with them hand in hand with that. So once we get the city lot done, we'll move over to the peninsula, which would be, there's a drainage channel there. I think it's near Gunderson's and Lewis's. And that's where the brunt of the material is at. We'll remove about 15,000 cubic yards off that peninsula. And then again, once we can't reach it from shoreline, we'll move to barge activity and remove the soils from there. We estimate there's about 3,000 to 4,000 cubic yards of sediment that is below water that we'll have to go retrieve with barges and excavator.
How much water do you have to float the barge?
We can float it in 36 inches of water. So I believe we're sitting pretty good right now. I believe once we get that excavated out and we produce water, so to speak, for a port, we'll learn a lot more on if we need to talk to the Lake Association about giving us some more water. But we have not determined that yet. We have a lot of unknowns. And I believe we're going to get a lot smarter as this project goes as far as how much debris is in the soils, how much debris is, you can see it from the shore. Maybe that's just a little piece. Maybe the circumference is a lot more. We're just not sure. And the state is aware of that, but they just keep telling us this is what the contract is. So we are going to do what's on the plans and let them direct us.
I know that there are more than one peninsula.
Yes.
And the other peninsulas, you won't be doing anything with it this time?
Not according to the contract. The contract has to be completed by August 1st, 2025. And if they expand our scope of work to where we need more time, they will expand that. But I don't know exactly what the state has allotted. I've heard 1.2 million, and I think that leaves about $150,000 for more removals. And I'm not sure how they plan to spend it, or if that extra $150,000 got absorbed by Banner for managing the project. I'm not sure what the budget looks like. So that will be up to them to give us direction.
Amy, can you scroll down to the scope? The map that shows, yeah, there we go. So right now, everything in the scope is identified on this.
It's all
this map.
identified, but yes. As a citizen, I see more, but this is what we're contracted to do. So.
And you live on McCook Lake?
I live on Lakeview Drive. My wife and her family lost their home at 53 North Shore Drive. They've been there for 40 years. So yes, it is very much a part of me as well.
Will you float the barge off the city lot, site 2?
Yes, we will bring in a crane and float the barges right there. For pure access, the city lot isn't nearly as steep as the other lot, so we would have less work to get the semis and cranes backed in there. So that is going to be our path of least resistance, and that has the least amount of soil for us to excavate from the shoreline to be able to make water and be able to set in from there.
So the boat ramp is not currently in your
The
plans?
boat ramp is not in play, no, it just, logistically, it doesn't work. Not to mention it then protects the concrete of the boat ramp if we were to have to access through there. But then again, things can change and maybe we'll need it.
Yeah.
As of right now, today, we will not need it.
So the MOU that is on the agenda covers the site 2, the city lot, and the boat ramp. So it allows them access to that.
Where's the dirt gonna go, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes, it's going to the Dakota Dunes lot behind the Catholic Church, St. Teresa, is that
Okay.
right? I believe it's 711 North River Shore Road.
So we can't put it back in the holes?
No, one of the questions that I had asked as a contractor at the Adams Center was, hey, I'd like to take this material across the street. I actually spoke with Burr Hoops about putting it back there, and they were a little bit excited, and they said, absolutely not, it cannot go back there. And I asked why, and they said, that's what the permit allows. This is what we have. So, my intent was there, right?
Seems kinda crazy to,
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of debris, possibly a lot of debris in that.
Yes, potentially, yes. It's assumed that there's gonna be 2x4s, all kinds of things in those.
the holes are pretty deep though.
What,
Oh, the holes in North Shore are pretty deep. I mean, if a little bit of that stuff got in there, I don't think that would be a,
yeah, I believe they're clean, and they were demoed, and we have an obligation to clear the debris out of it and take it to a licensed landfill. So our practices out at 711 River Shore Drive would stay the same if we got to dump them on the other side of the road. But again, the permitting doesn't allow that, so therefore we cannot dispose there. Good.
And it's environmental reasons, or what were you given? You were
That-
given nothing?
Just strictly the permit. The permitting would not allow that. What that means, I don't know. I asked Ryan Tobin in several different angles, and he just said the permitting does not allow that. And Ryan Tobin is the engineer in charge for the game fish and parks. Very understanding man, however, they have their limitations too. I did ask if we could dump it in a field, let dry, and then put it back with residents.
I was thinking the same thing.
Then, yes, we looked at that angle too, and it's not within the permits.
Jeff, have you had conversations with Game Fish and Parks about that?
I have, but they told me pretty much the same thing they told, you know. And they definitely didn't want any of this dirt where it could get back into the lake. And so that kind of precludes the south end. Now on the north, or south of North Shore, but on the north side, it's just not in the permit. So, is what it is.
Seems like we should have another conversation.
I would think that we should pursue that in some way, shape, or form.
I guess we could talk about that.
I'm open to you guys if you need to talk about it, or if I could show you where the permits are at in the specs, or give you a lead on a contact. However, as of right now, that's the path we're moving forward with our NPDES permit and our SWIP permit, which takes front-end time, CEC's handling that for us. So once that's approved, if we change it, then that may delay things.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just
No,
think,
no,
I
I-
just think it's goofy.
I think the strategy here should be, let them start pulling it out, get the dirt out of there, we'll see what it's like, and then we can decide whether we want to pursue it or not. You just don't know what it's in it, plus a lot of it's gonna be wet soup, so to speak, so before we go after anything, let's let them start the process and evaluate it, and then we can develop a strategy from that.
And keep in mind, we're starting at the site number 2, which is the city lot, which is the smaller of the two. So if there is a change, then we have the brunt of it at site number 1, which they identify as the dependency.
Okay.
Kelly, this question's more for the public, but if individual homeowners wanted to use your company to help them with some issues on their shores? Is that a possibility once your scope is met with the state?
Absolutely, we're there, I'm an open book. If they need to contact me or come visit, I will be the one on site doing the work. So I'm more than open to supporting whatever people may need or give them any help that we can give them. Absolutely.
Okay.
And we, for the record, let's just say that Chris, you come and talk to us. And my immediate answer is going to be, I have to satisfy this contract, which is due on August 1st. Once we've accomplished that, whether it be before, but it won't be after, we can move on to your project itself.
Gotcha. Thank you.
We have until it freezes over, till, let's just call it Thanksgiving, to be able to accomplish a lot of things out on the water, if need be.
All right.
Cool.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Yeah, thanks for.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Oh, just consider the MOU.
Yes, so we need a memo of understanding to allow access to the city lot and the public boat ramp, just so that they can access those points. So we'll look for a motion for that.
So moved.
That was Julie.
I'll second.
Vince seconds. Any other discussion on that?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When he's done with his work, there's still not a shoreline specifically, it's still just where the dirt comes into the lake. There's not gonna be a seawall there,
No.
anywhere. So the whole north shore still needs to be,
Yeah, all the
The
bank on
coastline.
North Shore would still need some sort of restoration.
thank you.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Okay, moving on to flood mitigation. So,
This is going to be the second installment. At the last meeting, John presented some concepts to you. Want to kind of revisit those concepts. I think Ross has got some additional information he wants to share with you. And then also, I would like to just kind of open it up for a little bit of discussion to get direction for the next meeting on what you want to see, what your feelings are, having seen it twice now. And then also, I would like to ask you if you have any questions about the work order that Stockwell has presented. So with that, I'd just turn it over to Ross and let him show you a couple videos that he has, I think, and
Yeah. All right, thanks, Jeff. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation that John went through at the last meeting, but I will just kind of start off with a quick summary, refresher. So this is kind of the highlights of our scope of work, which is calibrating the existing hydraulic models, evaluating existing conditions model, develop some alternatives for mitigation, and then provide these project deliverables, which is drainage analysis, some preliminary designs, and preliminary cost estimates that we can then go to seek more funding to carry these forward. And this is kind of the project team information. So the first map that John kind of talked about at the last meeting was this, and this is, you know, a high-level view of the flood event that happened last June. And so anything in blue here would be inundated water. And then one thing Jeff asked us to provide with today's meeting is some videos kind of showing how our models run through this. Let's see, get this to open.
so this is the flood water coming across the interstate, coming across the field, and you can kind of see, this is existing conditions.
Yeah,
So this is kind of what happened during the flood.
these video files are a little large, so let me try and pause this and I'll kind of go through it again. as it's going through right now. You can kind of see the inundation levels growing. You know, as John explained, we're not modeling anything east of the interstate. That's kind of a separate model that developed the flows that are coming across the interstate, and that's what we're putting into our model to kind of develop this map of the inundations.
So maybe start it one more time, that explanation.
Yeah, if it'll let me.
Ross, one question.
Yep.
On the diversion channel alternates 1, 2, and 3, they show a diversion channel, or how are they going to get the water across from the east side across I-29? Is it still going to come over?
It's still going to, based on what we're proposing right now, it's still, we're just capturing the water that's coming across the interstate. So we're not doing anything on the east side of the interstate. I can tell you that, you know, we did some very preliminary investigations on options that could pick up water from the east side of the interstate. I think those would be much larger scope projects, I mean, with tunneling underneath the interstate to get a culvert system or something underneath. So we didn't really take those any further. I mean, if needed, I mean, we could consider something like that.
I think that's more of a solution for the long-term mitigation project, and within the letter of intent that the county submitted to the Corps of Engineers would address that. What the McCook Lake mitigation plan in the short term is just to keep from what happening in McCook Lake in June to happening again in a similar event. So if Ross plays that video one more.
Yeah, so before I go back into the video, I just wanted to kind of explain the time steps. So there's a time aspect to that video, and you'll see at the top of the screen. But then this is the hydrograph of the river overtopping, or the overtopping of I-29. So this is the model that ReSpec has given us, and they're recalibrating right now to make sure that this agrees with their models. But you can kind of see, you know, you start out at no overtopping, and then once the interstate starts overtopping, it builds and builds and builds up to just under 3,500 CFS, and that's over the course of, you know, almost a 10-hour period, and then it takes another, you know, 15 to 20 hours for that flow to dissipate and to kind of get back into the river or the lake.
So you're kind of seeing that curve unfold on the screen.
Yeah. So right now I'm starting out at time 0. So you can see the water just starting to overtop the interstate and filling up in those fields. So this is an hour into the event. And then, so now I'm 4 hours in, and at that point you can kind of see, you know, the school area, the area of Penrose starting to get inundated, and it's kind of tough because this map is so far out, but you can see North Shore is starting to overtop already at that point. And then as we continue, we get to about 6.5 hours, so the lake is already overflowing its banks. The farm areas north of the lake are already inundated. And then as we progress, so one thing I wanted to point out here, at about 10 hours, the areas on that southeast side of the lake have filled in, but it still can't overtop. There's a road kind of down here along the river, and that's kind of holding back any flow from getting into the Missouri. So everything just builds higher and higher in the lake as well at that point in time, and that's why you'll see that those areas just kind of sit for a little while until it starts to overtop that road and actually get out into the Missouri.
Was that culvert plugged?
There is a culvert there. I think it might have been partially plugged, but that culvert's not nearly big enough to handle any amount of flow. I mean, that's more just average rainwater. And then one thing kind of that was unknown prior to the flood event is that all of these fields in this area, they actually drain back towards the lake. They don't drain north to south. So as this water sits, the only place it has to go is back into the lake. So it's just kind of one big pond.
And that's what caused the second flood, which got West Shore, the canal area, is when the water backed up and started going back into the lake. Is that correct?
There's multiple aspects of that. So I think that's part of the reason why it built up so far to the north, is because it didn't have an outlet. And that's why part of our mitigation options are always considering this outlet channel to kind of change the flow direction of that land and get it to flow to the river. Because otherwise, anytime there's a flood event here, the lake is the low spot and everything drains towards the lake. For the most
So
part.
you should see that in the other videos that he has too. But I think that Hoffman Road is 1100.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember that during the event. So anything behind that, below 1100 is going to be vulnerable.
yep. Okay, so then as we get a little further along, so now we're 20 hours in. I think this is just past the peak flow of the water coming across the interstate. So there's still water coming, but not as drastically or not as quickly as it was. So that's why you see some of those areas to the north are starting to dissipate, and that water is just making its way into the lake and continuing to flow out the south end. So
Did Deer Run get water?
It was pretty close, I think. Yeah,
No homes that you know of?
not to my knowledge.
Two?
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought there was basement issues.
Okay.
Okay, so then going back to my presentation, these are kind of those mitigation options. Just to recap, at the north end, we're building a diversion channel that's essentially the same, whether we would go with the east outlet or the west outlet option, which is a channel with a berm on the back side, kind of that southwest side, draining down to some sort of culvert or bridge structure that would take it from that channel, get it into the lake. And then on the outlets, if we did the east outlet, we would have a channel with an overtopping weir for controlling that flow all the way down to the lake. And with that option, we would build this berm or levee in green on this side, just to kind of isolate where the water is leaving the lake. If we went with the west option, we'd do essentially the same thing. This would be the diversion channel. We would still have to build a levee on this side to control and make sure that just that weir is controlling the outlet from the lake. And then with either option, we're proposing some sort of gated control structure, which essentially is just preventing backflow from the Missouri River if that would flood back into the lake. And so the next video I'm going to show you quick is, so this would be the east channel. So I'll start at the beginning here. You can see, you can't really see it within the model, but there's, the ground surface has this diversion channel built within it. So once you see the water start to come across the interstate, you don't see it spread into the fields. It's all being captured within that diversion channel. So now, about 2 hours into the event, our diversion channel area is more or less filling up, and water is just starting to get through that culvert structure into the lake. And the lake, you know, as we keep going through the time, you know, you can kind of see this area growing because we're allowing the lake to handle some of that flow, enough where we can add some additional storage into the system. but without getting into people's basements and causing flooding issues.
Was there about 4 foot of storage in the lake before it goes out?
Yeah, can you go back to this? So I'll zoom in a little here. So our lake overflow, we're setting at a 1090 elevation. The lowest walkout basement elevation is a 98. So we actually have about 8 feet, but then we're proposing to use 6 feet of that to get to a 1096 would be our highest lake level with this design, which still gives us 2 feet of buffer to protect against those basement floods. And so now, at 6 hours, you can kind of see it's just starting to get to that 1090 elevation, and it's starting to flow through that channel on the south end. So this would be the east option. And then on the west end, we have that berm built into this model, so you'll see this little pocket fill up, but then that won't spread out and flood those fields and the area kind of inside the lake. So then as we progress through the model, it really, we're past the peak at this point, so the water coming across the interstate is less than it was previous. Everything stays within those channels and is just kind of gradually getting towards the lake. And then eventually, we don't show the end of this model because it would take a little longer to get through it all. But eventually that diversion channel on the north end would completely drain dry because that's got flow on it. It would get into the lake, and then eventually the lake would drain down from that 1096 level back down to a 1090. Water would all recede back into the Missouri.
And you guys studied how this would affect the Missouri, right?
We haven't really gotten into the Missouri side of things right now. Kind of the main purpose was just to figure out how to handle this water coming from the Big Sioux.
But the amount going in there is about, at the peak, is 3,000 CFS, right? Or maybe less because it's being stored. But
Yeah, it's less than that. The last one is just the west channel option. So once again, you see the diversion channel at the north end is getting filled up with water. About 2 hours in again, it starts to get into the lake, so that's relatively unchanged from the last version you saw.
The amount of storage would be about the same in both alternatives?
Yes. Yep. So this one, you see water kind of getting out of the lake at about 5 hours into the event, which is a little sooner, I think, because of just the way the hydraulic grade lines work through the lake, closer to that entry point. But you still have the same total amount of storage within the lake that we're utilizing. So, after you get into about the peak, things don't really change. Water is just continuing to come across the interstate, go through this channel, get into the lake, go through the outlet channel back into the Missouri.
You might not know the answer to this, but storage-wise, would there be more in McCook Lake than there would be if you use Good Enough and Mud Lake? Is there more storage potential in McCook?
I don't know the exact volumes. I'd say the biggest difference is McCook Lake has some capacity to store water without doing any property damage, really. Whereas if we start pushing water over to different areas, then we are going to be affecting somebody else, potentially doing damage.
Gotcha.
We have modeled good, like, is that good enough, the top one? Up top? Yeah, we have modeled water, getting water over to there, and it creates some issues for the highway and for Deer Run. So that's one option we haven't pursued because of that.
I guess with that, you
I
know,
said, my brother really wouldn't like you to come to Lake good enough. He lives right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, I think the models, one of the reasons I wanted Ross to show you the models is just to show you how we're determining how these things work and how we're coming to conclusions about how to present them to you as options. They're conceptual options that would work if we implement them, but without seeing how the models flow and how the different options flow, I don't think you can ever really be comfortable with it. I mean, this is as comfortable as you can get, is using these models to imitate the flow. And so, and not only Stockwell, but also Respect is working on it to double check it. So I'm fairly comfortable with the accuracy and stuff. And now the question becomes, you know, how do you want to proceed? I just don't see any, there's very limited options outside of using McCook Lake as a conduit for this water.
And again, it's a short-term, 3-year plus solution versus
yeah,
a diversion channel up north that might be 10, 15 years
Yeah.
to get all that.
Like I said, we'll know more as we go along. Every month will give us more data sets, more information to make determinations on, but we gotta just, if we want something to work, we gotta keep pushing something forward.
And are we going to be asked to choose one of these options, or are you going to come up with a recommendation on which option based on costs and?
I think right now we would like to kind of push both at the same time to a certain degree.
I think we would lay both out because it's a function of, we need to have two options. We need to weigh in cost, obviously. We need to weigh in, you know, whose property is involved in the acquisition process. And then we've got to also weigh in the prospects of the long term. Because if the long term could happen sooner, you'd probably want to go the long term route. So I think we have to consider all these side by side as alternatives, and maybe one gets pushed out for unforeseen reason. But let's keep pushing them both forward, keep modeling them, keep pricing them, and get you a choice to make.
So is that what it boils down to, is price? Because like the one with the longer channel is going to be different than the one with the shorter channel coming out the south end of the lake or whatever. So it's the difference between the two is merely just the price of like what it's going to like, or the workload that's going to go along with it.
Price and land acquisition.
Yeah.
There might be, you know, some unforeseen environmental issues that we're not seeing in this analysis too. You know,
Yeah, I
in
think-
species or whatever it is, but
Yeah, if we're going to progress either of these models, we'd probably be going through the same route we're doing with both the levee relocation project and the North Shore bypass project, you know, right now, which is an EA, and usually those involve different alternatives you have to consider. So these might be the two alternatives, or two of the alternatives we consider for that analysis, and then, you know, part of the choice of the preferred alternative is going to be based on those environmental impacts and the land acquisition, you know, aspects of that.
whenever you're pursuing federal funding for them, you have to provide alternatives. And one of those alternatives is always a do-nothing alternative. So your choices will be from do nothing all the way to, you know, either one or the other options. So just kind of like on North Shore had 3 different options. The EA shook out which one was best to a degree. That's the same process we'll go through here.
And both of these alternates would be designed at 30%, and we're looking to maybe vote on this next meeting?
I think no, not necessarily vote at the next meeting. By April 30th, we'll want a direction on whether or not we want to push an application to get the whole thing funded, either the whole project funded or just the design funded. And then continue. If we did just the design, we would design it, and then while we're designing it, we would seek other funding. So there's a lot of different routes that could go, but the decisions that you'll have to make in the short term are, first of all, the work order that Stockwell has presented for all this work that they've done to date, plus getting it to a 30% completion so that we can submit for hazard mitigation dollars. That would be one. And then what we actually submit for hazard mitigation this round, is that just for the funding to design it, or is it for the whole project, that kind of stuff. Those are the decisions you'll be faced with between now and May 30th. Any other questions? Like I said, we'll bring this back next week. As you think through this and as you talk to people, if you have questions or concerns, try to email them to me so that I can get them queued up to be answered at the next meeting, and we'll continue to go through these working sessions to the end point.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
That's up to you.
Yeah, I think so. Nancy, please ask.
I do have actually a couple of questions. Last week we asked, and was brought to the board, if we could ask questions after each item, and I don't know if that was decided on.
Yeah, we have not even had a discussion on that yet.
So my question, I have two questions. One on this subject, will this be going to the public? Will we be able to have a say on which plan or presentation so everybody gets to see it?
I think there would be a public hearing type environment where the public could come and voice their support or concern for one option or the other, or all the options. And then the commission would take that into consideration as they develop their decision.
Well, since it would be federal funding, would they require a public hearing just like the DOT did for the bypass?
Maybe not for the mitigation
Okay.
application, but
we
to
could
implement
choose to
this,
do,
yeah.
we could choose to do one anyway, which would be a good thing.
Very helpful, so.
I think we need to.
My
Yeah, I
second
do too, for
question-
sure. Mm-hmm.
My second question, well, actually, third question goes back to the update on the Games Fish and Park project. What else is needed? What additional restoration beyond the contract would be needed on the lake?
Probably unforeseen debris or silt that you find that you weren't aware, that didn't show up in the sonar study. So as Kelly mentioned, as they're going, they may find things that didn't show up in their sonar survey, and then they have to go to the state for permission to go outside the original scope. So they really won't know that until they get into it.
That'll be a real-time answer too. As we find things, the state will give us real-time correction. Probably a 24 to 48 hour lag as we find things, or they'll have a budget provided, say, see this, do this. We'll have some direction going to it.
Yep.
So if the state says, no, they're not going to, it's not in the budget, and so he can't remove it, does the city come in and help with any of that?
We don't know yet.
Do you have so there's no budget for the city to say, well, we'll help pay for that?
There's nothing in the current budget, no.
But
Thank you.
thanks for your questions. All right, anything else, Ross, on mitigation?
That's all I have, unless anybody else has questions.
Okay. All right.
Sure.
Let's see. North Shore reconstruction, that's you too, Ross, right?
Yeah, let Jeff kick it off.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to update you on, at the last meeting, we talked to you about delaying the North Shore reconstruction project but moving forward with the Penrose project, reconstruction project, and we have advertised now for the Penrose project, so that is in progress. But the North Shore project, if you recall, is being held up for a couple reasons. One is the environmental review by Federal Highway, and the second part is the right-of-way easements that we need. And so if you scroll down a little bit, we wanted to just kind of show you, maybe zoom out a little bit, to give you an idea. The green is the easements we currently have, and the reds are what we still need. You know, there's a couple there on Penrose that we need, but they're not really material to the construction project. So that's, I think we're able to move forward with that, but the ones on North Shore are the ones we need to secure in the coming weeks and months in anticipation of a fall bid letting for North Shore.
Jeff, why are some of the Penrose lots not needed and others are?
Well, Penrose has an actual right-of-way to it, whereas North Shore never did. And so what we needed for, like, what does that say, 7 and 9, those are just construction easements that would allow us to grade back into their yard. If they don't want us to grade back in their yard, we can still build the road.
I see.
The problem on North Shore existed before the flood. That was pre-North Sioux taking that over.
On North Shore?
Yes.
So if there's not any questions on that, I would ask, I did want to kind of update you too as part of this agenda item. You know, the school has a project that's going to be starting here May 15th to fill their hole in back there. And the original project was bid with going all the way around the loop to using it, but now with North Shore not being done, we talked to them today about using North Shore to shorten up the project. So they would come in on North Shore, come into the school parking lot, and then come out on Penrose empty and out. So that's kind of an update to what was going to happen, is they were going to go all the way around, up around the, what's that road called?
Off-the-ear?
It's a,
The overpass?
yeah, over the overpass.
Off-the-ear.
Yeah.
I won't even try to say that.
Yeah, off-the-ear.
Okay. Come over across that and then come down and then come in the west end. This will allow them to come and use exit 4 and shorten it up. But to do that, they're going to use our North Shore Road, and then they're going to use Penrose on the back end to bring empty trucks out.
So there's nothing else you need to start Penrose besides the bids and?
Yeah, right now we're advertising, our first advertisement is this Thursday. So we'll have the plans and specifications hosted on our website. That's how we always do it. We do 2 advertisements, and then on May 21st, we'll open the bids here at City Hall at 2 p.m. Then we'll review the bids, make sure they're in order, make sure there's no mistakes, and then we'll provide you guys a recommendation to award at the next council meeting after that.
What's the completion date on that?
Right now, I think September 7th is our overall completion date for the whole Penrose project. But we have some interim completion dates. So one of those is related to the temporary access road removal on the Dakota Valley School District and Brunings properties. So not showing up on this map, but part of the project is we have to remove those temporary roads that we built immediately following the flood event and restore those areas with topsoil and seed. So those areas will be done by July 1st is our goal. And then the majority of the surfacing work will be complete on Penrose by the early August. I think our goal is to ensure that we don't have any closures or anything on North Shore. after that. And then we'll have an extended completion date to get the seating and stuff behind the curb completed after that. And I think the schools project, I think they're anticipating starting work on May 15th. Likely our project wouldn't start construction until early June, so that gives them a couple weeks of utilizing that route Jeff was talking about with hauling or bringing empty trucks down Penrose before we were going to essentially close off Penrose for our project.
So we'll be monitoring both North Shore and Penrose. If it looks like the traffic is creating too much damage, we will reroute them or back around to the original. But it's only a 2-week window, so we're hoping that it can go pretty smoothly. Also, I asked, Stockwell's putting together some sketch concepts of how to deal with the pooling water on North Shore that you guys have talked about, and then also a potential temporary sidewalk. So hopefully we can introduce that to you in the coming weeks.
Great. Any
Yeah,
other?
because when I was coming down here today, there's a bunch of kids that are walking along North Shore.
Yeah.
Don't look very safe, especially when you get to those concrete areas where we have the risen up a little bit.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, it is.
All right, any other questions on Penrose? If not, we'll move on to the North Shore Bypass
Okay.
project.
And let's start in here.
Yeah, so Chad Huey is here, who's the project manager for Stockwell on this project. He's going to just kind of give you an update of where the project at, kind of go through a version of the presentation that was held at the public hearing a couple weeks ago. And then he'll be available to answer any questions you might have. We'll have an agreement for the commission to review here sometime before June 1st as to the grant agreement that spells out how much money that the feds will provide and what the city will do in return for that and what our local matches and all that stuff. So that'll be on your agenda here before June 1st. It's in the meeting packet too, the presentation, so.
All right, good afternoon, Chad Heavey with Stockwell Engineers. So this is the same presentation that was prepared and presented on the 15th. I'm not going, at the open house, we played it repeatedly. It was very dry, I think. So hopefully this can be a little more interactive than that was. But the first thing I wanted just to highlight was that, this is when you guys were talking about the environmental assessment document or the process a little bit ago, this is what I'm gonna try to, in 16 slides, talk about what's in this document here. So probably the appendixes are probably 700 pages, and then the actual report's 100 pages, and I'm going to try to get it in here to about, something we can get done in about 10 minutes. So there's been a lot of work and a lot of information in there. Did you advance that or did I?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. All right. Again, the primary purpose of this meeting was to introduce the environmental assessment and the Section 4F statement, which is how it affects parks and trail projects, and then to get feedback from the public. Lots of people involved with this. The team includes the Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, you guys here. Our team includes us, Felsberg, Holt, and Oliveg, who did the environmental assessment, or the meat of it. WSB, I don't know what's going on here. WSB and VAL, Appraisals and Land Services, are the ones that are involved right now with meeting with property owners and talking about right away. So this really started or culminated when President Biden signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022. And that act included a $17 million project that was initiated by Senator Rounds. And I think the key thing to take out of this is that the spending request was to complete a realignment bypass project on North Shore Drive that would route farm, school, and residential traffic from west of McCook Lake, take it off the existing North Shore Drive and put it onto the bypass road. Okay, the environmental assessment, since it's federally funded, this is required per the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. And every project that uses federal funding, any federal agency has to follow this process. So in conjunction with the environmental assessment, there's a 4F evaluation. And again, that is to specifically look at publicly owned parks, recreational lands, wildlife refuges, and historic sites. And the use of a Section 4F property occurs when land is permanently incorporated or temporarily used to build the project. The EA process is really relies on this decision-making process guided by the project's purpose and need. And the purpose of this project is twofold. It is to accommodate future mobility in North Sioux City by reducing the expected roadway congestion along North Shore Drive, and to fulfill that federally mandated funding requirement for the project that was included in the Consolidated Act. Now, when we talk about project needs and we talk about congestion, we're talking about levels of service, and in the business we talk about levels of service as being A, B, C, D, E, and F. And so what was decided for this project by the DOT that an acceptable level of service is defined as being a section or level B. And this is really nothing more than a qualitative measure that describes the operating conditions on the roadway, considering factors like speed, travel time, freedom to maneuver, and traffic interruptions. And additionally, it's driver comfort.
Do you know what the level of service was? I'm sorry. Do we know what the level of service was on North Shore before?
D.
Yes. But I can I'll get to that in a second.
Thanks.
And so just, level service A is uninterrupted traffic flow, and level service F, which is the worst, is just a breakdown of traffic flow with a ton of congestion and delay. And so in a road like this, the DOT is assigned an achievable level of service as B. So during the preliminary design and the environmental review, alternative analysis were looked at, and a screening process were completed to evaluate alignment, intersections, and cross-section alternatives. And a lot of that evaluation is done in this book here. And like Jeff mentioned earlier, in addition to the no-build alternative, We looked at 3 different concepts for the alignment of North Shore Drive. Option 1 being on the north side of the school campus, alternative 2 being approximately 650 feet north of that, and then alternative 3, which was widening the existing North Shore Drive. And so before we even got into the evaluation of the alternatives, alternative 3 was eliminated because it would result in the longest travel time, had the greatest traffic impacts, or greatest property impacts. The construction cost was 3 times higher, and it did not meet the purpose and need for constructing a bypass project. Also looked at T-intersection and roundabouts. Those were also eliminated because of safety concerns, additional property impacts, and driver inexperience with roundabouts. We also looked at different cross-section alternatives. We looked at a 2-lane section, a 3-lane section with a continuous center turn lane. These also were eliminated because the level of service associated with the 2-lane section did not meet the desired level of B. And so the cross-section that is recommended is a 3-lane section with a median and left turn lanes at the major intersections. Several environmental considerations, including economic, social, and biological impacts, were evaluated for the no-build, the alternative 1 and alternative 2, and that's the meat of this EA document as we compare those, as we go through the different alternatives. So there's a lot of information here. I'm gonna highlight some of them. Some of these are the environmental considerations considered is on this list here. Right away is the land required for the construction, operation, maintenance of the transportation facility. Alternative 1 requires less right of way and land than alternative 2. Alternative 1 has less impact on current farmland, and the permanent wetland impacts are less with alternative 1. Alternative 1 will have less impact to existing vegetation.
Could you go back 1 slide?
Yep.
Just wanted to talk about floodplains and levees. Both alternatives, no impact, FEMA designated floodplain or floodways. North Shore Drive is not meant for any flood mitigation, or correct?
No, the goal is for transportation improvements only.
Thank you.
We did talk about threatened and endangered species, but either alternative has the same effect. Let's see, cultural resources. Alternative 2 does require less permanent acquisition regarding 4F properties. However, neither alternative is expected to impact the recreational facilities, features, or attributes that qualify the properties under protection for 4F. And so this is the one time where the alternative 2 was had an advantage over alternative 1. Thing I want to highlight on this slide is the cost. Alternative 1 is about $2.5 million less than alternative 2. And the other thing I want to point out is that the travel time with alternative 1 is less between the east end of the project and the west end of the project. This slide here kind of is a summary of the different advantages and disadvantages of each alternative. Alternative 1, the advantages and disadvantages are on the left. The same for alternative 2 are listed on the right. And the build alternative 1, based on this evaluation, is the preferred alternative. So there is a copy of the EA here. There's one at northshorebypass.com. We had a tremendous turnout, I think, at the public input. We've received to date, I think, 7 comments regarding the EA. With the EA process, it's a 30-day window. There's a 30-day public comment period, and it's, it started about April 1st and it ends about May 2nd. So that public meeting was kind of in the middle of that 30-day comment. And so you can still, this presentation's on the website. There's a ton of information out there. You can leave your comments here. And what's going on now is, so once that comment period is done, we will incorporate the comments, we'll put draft responses together, get them in the EA document, and then that'll go back to the DOT and the Federal Highway to review. The right-of-way team has been in contact with the affected property owners. Some people we need right-of-way from, some people we need easements from, some people we need right-of-way, temporary easements for construction to grade back in, and permanent easements, let's say for a culvert or a light post base or things like that. And so our right-of-way guy was in town last week. I know he met or talked to several properties. Some additional questions have come out of that, which we're in the process of addressing. And the goal with all of this would be we would receive a finding of no significant impact issued by the Federal Highway Administration. That would basically wrap up the EA and give us the green light to proceed with acquiring right-of-way. That's kind of the EA side of it. What we're doing on the kind of the nuts and bolts and the design side of it is we're working on the construction plans. They have to be submitted to the DOT, I think by July 11th. To get ready for bid. So that's what we're nose to the grindstone on that right now, and we're going to keep working on the right of way and addressing questions as they come up with the different property owners. So a lot of information here. I can go back and answer any questions.
Your best guess on a project start?
I would think it's going to be in 26 and 27. I mean, how it, in a perfect world, we were just talking about this on the way down, it's not very often that unless you're doing a subdivision or a development project where you go out and you have virgin dirt and it's never been touched. And so what we'd like to do is be able to go out, do utilities and grade it during 1 year and then let everything kind of settle, go through a freeze-thaw cycle, and then come back and do whatever we have to do to maybe touch up the grading and then pave it. So it goes through a cycle of freeze-thaw. So at this point, I hope it's 26 and 27.
One comment I was going to make too is Stockwell is actually under contract with South Dakota DOT, not North Sioux City on this project. That agreement I spoke to you earlier about, and you will have a chance to review and approve. That outlines how we pay, or DOT pays Stockwell, then we pay DOT our portion, which is about 20% of the total cost. So it's kind of a unique project, being that it's in an earmark, as South Dakota DOT is contracting with Stockwell for the design of it, and will also for the construction engineering of it, and then we reimburse the state 20%.
And the state would bid the project.
The state will bid the project.
Everything goes through the state.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it's bid, they'll make a decision on who administers the construction of it, if it's DOT staff or if they go out to a consultant. So.
Good. All right. Any questions?
Have the public comments been positive up to this point? I haven't looked, I'm sorry. I haven't been on the website.
No, and I don't know if the public can see the comments when they come in. There's been 7. It's hard to, I think 4 have been from maybe the folks that live on Penrose, just with some concerns about the proximity of the road to Penrose. And the rest of the projects, the rest of the comments have been positive. And you kind of have to, I mean, we did the same thing last fall where we had another public meeting, and at that point we probably had maybe 20 to 25 comments. And those are comments and responses are also on the website. And so I think you got to, and then in this document, there'll be a whole summary of every public comment received.
Yeah.
So that'll get added to this. So there's some people that support option 1, some that support option 2, and some that supported option 3.
Yeah.
A lot of work has went into get to where we're at today. So, but I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Just for some background, the major, concerns about this project, Penrose has always been concerned with the traffic by there that this creates. And they've been vocal about that. And a lot of the comments that are on the website are from them in that regard. Penrose was, I think, originally connected to the bypass, which was removed. And then the other complaints or concerns have mainly come from property owners on the west side of the project, on the west side of West Shore Drive. Yeah, so just to give you a flavor of that.
I'll maybe just leave this here.
All right, thanks, Chad. Well, moving on to the paperwork, the legal work.
Yeah, these are the organizational items, and we included them in your meeting packet. There were some changes that Sarah has made, and she'll go over those changes. But I was hoping we could go through these documents and get any questions that you might have or concerns you might have the way they're currently written, so that we could make changes, talk through some choices that we have to make, so that we could have the first reading of these ordinances at our next meeting on the 5th. It takes 2 readings. We'll meet them on the 5th and the 12th, and then 20 days after publication, they would become law. So that's the goal. If we don't get there on the 5th, we can always do that on the 12th. But I think, like when we talk in our meetings, we view these as probably 90% complete, but we need your guidance to complete the next 10%. So with that, Amy, if you want to scroll through it, Sarah, if you could just talk through the changes.
Yeah.
And then if you have any questions or comments as we go through these sections, please speak up. And
I would say of the 3 ordinances, and we'll start with 2025-03, which is the section that goes to the core of our organization as a commission. It focuses on the mayor and the commissioners. There's some, just minor changes to wording, not significant of note there. I did change some wording. Probably the most substantive change you're going to see is in section 2.04.050, that these 2 sections, vacancy in office is 50. That would be for permanent vacancies. So if someone is no longer sitting in their position, they're available by death, resignation, removal from office, or failure to qualify, moving out of the residency, how do we handle that for the mayor, and how do we handle that for the commission? These aren't really choices, but they are what is legally appropriate there. So the organization of this, the way we had it in our first draft to you, wasn't like how I wanted it as we were reading it as a whole. And so that's why there's some more, a lot of change in red line and green line where we move things to different areas. And that the first section 50 is on the vacancy for permanent, and then the next section would be for temporary coverage, again, for both the mayor and the commissioner. So really not changing what those were, but the real organization of that was changed, and duplication was eliminated. Then a little bit of structure change again in the next section for meetings of the commission. Initially, we had part of this that we were adopting the rules of procedure in this section. I thought it fit better with the section 100. So if you move down a couple sections, that's where that's been relocated. Initially, our draft had said that, the commission can be the judge of the election and their qualification and can adopt procedures for parliamentary procedure, can adopt a code of ethics, and can adopt attendance requirements. Rather than saying we can do it, but not do it, I've included that we have done that. And so it is adopting then that ISU simplified parliamentary procedure document, which is that 18-page summary of a parliamentary procedure rather than the Robert's Rules of Order. I don't think Jeff had included that in the packet, but we need to get that out to you so you can see what that looks like. And our intent would be that we would adopt that. So we would say, if there's an issue with how we're doing things for parliamentary procedure, we're going to look at this guide to answer those questions. This commission can also at any time say, hey, those specific rules aren't serving our purpose for this, we need to do it, and we're going to suspend those rules and then determine how we're going to act accordingly. So it gives you some flexibility with your actions and how you can take it, but we're going to start off with adopting that as a guide.
Can we go back up
Sure.
to the hour that we have? 6 o'clock?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I wasn't meaning to skip over those. I was just kind of summarizing what we're going to do for changes in here. So the items that are highlighted are the things that we need to decide. And so one of those are the days of the meeting and the times of the meeting. And that is in section 70, 2.04.
Let's let Sarah outline all the changes she's made, and then we'll go back to the top of the document and we'll address those yellow highlighted issues. Fair enough?
Okay. So we're talking about section 100. Again, we've added, in addition to adopting the parliamentary procedure, that we were adopting the code of ethics and conduct that we have also been reviewing. You would add in the date there and include those actions that can be taken. And then the last section there talks about an attendance requirement. So this is new. This was not in your first draft, just said that we could establish an attendance requirement. This is an example that I pulled from similar or adapted from another community. I think it was Brookings that had required a certain amount of attendance at the regular meetings during a fiscal year, or if you've missed 3 regular meetings in a row, any of those things can cause you to forfeit your position, unless the commission would excuse that and say, for whatever reason, we are going to excuse not meeting an attendance requirement of 80% of the meetings, or missing 3 in a row without an excuse.
And then kind of the reason I think we need that is because we have only a 5-member board. And absences can start affecting our abilities to have quorums. Since we're an at-large group now instead of a ward group, having more and more, or having the most representation on the commission, I think is going to be very important, as you're all representing the community at large instead of your specific ward. So we felt that that was kind of something that we should add, and obviously the yellow stuff is open for discussion, but that's the reason for its addition.
And that was the last real substantive change. The other one on the last page for the commission department assignments was just changing a placement of that. So that summarizes the overall substantive changes of this. Within this section, there are a number of highlighted items that we do need to have you give us some direction on as to what you want us to do. I would like to see us do that, through motion, or at least, that those who are here are going to say, yes, I'm in agreement with this. So we can kind of take those in order, if you want to, starting as we go through this ordinance. So the first one is the terms of office. Current ordinance has it at 4 for the council, and so we kept it that, but your options are anywhere between 2 and 5 years. As I mentioned last time, if you do it every 5 years, then only one person is up for election on an annual basis. When you start going down to 4, 3, and 2, you start having more turnover every year, with the shorter time periods being, 2 or more, are turning over on that regular basis.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts on terms. What do you guys think?
I'd like to go 2. I think we need to give more people more opportunity to do this if they choose to. It is just my opinion. I think 4 years, that's a long time.
4 is a long time.
Yeah.
I agree that 4 is kind of long. I would push for 3, just so that if you do get elected, you have an opportunity to see your projects implemented, because it does take time to get things pushed through and done. So, like, if we agree to something and the project's going to take a while, I'd like to see it put into place before I'm leaving.
Having been here almost 1 year now, what I like about the 4 years, I have spent this whole last year trying to figure out all the financing issues. And I think that because of the difference in having less people, I'm happy with the 4, but my grandkids tell me when my term is up, I'm done.
You say you're not the boss of me, right?
I told them they're not the boss of me yet.
Julie, what's your thought?
I kind of like the idea of a 3-year term just because 4 years is a really long time. If the public doesn't like the job that someone is doing or something like that, 4 years is a long time, and I don't want to scare anybody out from running with the 4-year term, because that's a big commitment and very daunting, whereas 2 years is almost too short. Like Jessica said, for keeping, just getting used to everything and seeing projects through, and campaigning is a lot of work too. So, just not too many votes and campaigns, but just kind of a happy medium of 3 years, I think, would be good for me.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I guess I'm personally kind of leaning towards 3 as well. And it's right between you two, 4 and 2.
And one thing I'll just note is that this gets implemented over time, okay? So you were elected to specific year terms. You will fulfill those terms that you were elected to, okay? So what would happen was that Vince's was the 1-year term, and so whatever we choose as the term would go on the ballot for that next election in 26. And then the 2-year position, is that yours, Jessica?
Yes.
So that, that you serve that 2 years, and then that goes on the ballot as 3. The 3-year position, I believe, was Julie, and that would go on in the same way. You would still fulfill 4, even if we choose 3. The mayor still serves 5, even if we choose 3.
Really?
Yes. So as you read this through, we can't change what you were elected to. Close read to that. Were there any questions or other thoughts on this one? Okay.
Was there anything about, like, Julie being remote? Is there anything in any of these ordinances about that?
No, there isn't anything that specifically talks about remote participation. Under state law, though, your attendance is that if you are heard do a roll call, whether that's being by telephonic participation or other digital participation, you are considered attending that meeting. So that's under South Dakota open law, and it's been more of a recent change that you can do that, or it's been recognized. So I wouldn't advise us to go anything different than what the state law allows for that open meeting.
Yep, that makes sense.
And again, this next section is really focusing on appointed officers and employees of the city. And if there's no further questions, then the last ordinance would be 2025-05, and this is just correcting the commission references. So again, pretty minor changes in terms of what was included or didn't need to be included if it was repealed, and formatting. So that's all of that very long ordinance of 33 pages. Any questions on that one? No?
That was the easy one.
Yeah. All right, then the final legal document would be that Code of Ethics and Conduct for elected and appointed officers. And again, I would say mostly just some editorial or organization, how I phrased things. I did update it in this first draft. It had the Robert's Rules of Order. I updated it on page 5 under conduct, that we would reference that simplified parliamentary procedure to be consistent. And then I think the other changes would be more in the sanctions section, which I felt like as I read that a second time, were not consistent with what we had adopted as making the commission the judge of its own qualifications. So I specifically referenced back to that section 2.04.100 and just simplified that language so that it would be more consistent in terms of what the commission can do, which is basically anything it decides to do for sanctions that would be in violation of the Code of Conduct or Ethics. And then I noted that the references to how it applied to other than elected representatives was specific to boards and commissions. And so because the intent was this to cover any appointed officials, that includes board and commissions, but also Amy's position, chief of police, those other appointed officials, we made sure that the language was consistent there. And this is, again, not a code of ordinances, but it would be a document that the commission would adopt and approve as of effective date. We would include a reference to that in that first section of the ordinance 2025-03. And then include this every time we have orientations, new people that are coming on board or being appointed. They would be given this and sign an acknowledgement as part of that as we implement it going forward.
So this is something totally new?
Yes.
We've never done this before here?
Correct.
There was nothing,
Okay.
before.
The way they kind of initiated, I believe, was one of the grants that the city was going to get required a code of conduct policy. And then, so that's when they brought this to the table. This was before I came on board, but, and then it just never made it any further than that.
There is a code of ordinances. I don't have them right in front of me, but it's in that first section 2 or title 2. If you look in that chapter, that talks about conflict of interest, but it kind of pulls back to state code and included terms that were probably required for specific grants that we were throwing in there. And so this would be a separate thing that's probably more comprehensive. I think that one could probably also be edited, but we didn't want to, there's only so much we can bite off here and going forward. So ultimately it'd be nice to reference that in that conflict of interest or clean that up a little bit as well. This would be a, kind of the standard that we are referencing in your commission ordinance, that we are agreeing that these are the rules of conduct and ethics that we're all going to abide by.
Chris, could I add one other thing? Another reason that this is kind of needed is because we've had some pretty hectic council meetings in the past, and we want to try to introduce some more decorum to that, and also just some more process to it. And the open meetings law is part of that whole process, and we'll be doing some training on that. I just don't, within that open meeting process, I want the commission to understand that they can come talk to me at any time in my office without violating any of the open meeting laws. That is really important to the way I manage, is that I need to make sure that I have contact with the commissioners, either on an individual basis or on a group basis, so that I can convey information and we can flesh out ideas. So I want to, I don't think it's addressed in this code of conduct, but it was something I want to make sure is everybody's aware of. Then the other part of it is, the public meeting part of it, and being able to, for the public to be able to comment on individual agenda items is something that we need to, obviously we need to take public input during the public input portion. But public meetings are the commission doing the city's business in public. It's not meant to be necessarily a issue by issue exchange of ideas. That's for when the public input, that's for public hearings, if you want to have public hearings on a specific item so that you can take public input. But public input is just one component that the commission uses to formulate an opinion or a policy. So the one thing that some of the problems that we've had in the past is, people yelling questions from the audience, and then there became a back and forth. While that can be productive at times, sometimes it can get carried away. So we need to be able to manage that. So as we look at our agendas moving forward, Chris is going to have a lot of discretion on how that operates. But if we're going to take public input, we should try to designate a time for it and conduct it under a public hearing format.
I think the only problem with that, though, is by the time we got to the public discussion, the council was already by like 7 or 8 things, or you did it at a time, and there was no. And I think for me, it's going to be incredibly important that if we're talking about like what we're talking about today, like if there are people that had questions about how we're going to get the dirt out of the lake, I think we need to address that at that time frame. And if we're going to start earlier at 6 o'clock now for the meetings, I think we got time to do that kind of stuff. So
I would agree with that, but it has to be done under a controlled environment. It can't be people shouting from the back row a question, and Chris needs to recognize them and bring them up to the podium.
I agree with you, Vince, but I think maybe for a while we can try to continue doing this like we did tonight. And if it became an issue, we can always change.
we can.
But yeah, I don't want to extend I don't want to interrupt the meetings too much, but when Stockwell has a presentation up and there's questions about it, it would be nice to be able to hit on a few of those. And then that does free up time on community input. Like, for example, if Nancy had a question today during one topic, she doesn't have to wait till the next meeting at the community input to say the same thing. So it's a wash on time.
And I kind of agree with Lynn. That's why we're here, right? I mean, those are our bosses. So I kind of think we need to keep it as open as we possibly can.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if it gets out of hand, we'll have to make some rule changes.
Right.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I have seen it done too, where a mayor will say, if you're here on any agenda item, we will address your comment with those agenda items, but address anything else at the public.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you have something else off the agenda, do it
Or
now.
if somebody is like, hey, I don't have time to stick around here until you get to the 18th thing on your agenda, but I want you to know X, Y, and Z, you
Then they could
handle
do
it
that.
that way. I think it does get a little hard for you guys to manage, like today when we were going back to the MOU for the dredging in the middle of the project on the, so if you do try to, give some guidance there.
I think it has to be while we're on that topic. We're not
With
going
you.
back.
Right.
But if it's not on the agenda, then they have to do it on community input.
And then have people come to the podium.
Yeah.
It's not just about making people come, it's so they can hear,
Well, and we need
you
to
guys
know
need to hear
who
that,
they are.
other people need to, and it
Name and
is
address.
helpful. Yeah.
Yep. I think we can, I like that.
I do too. I think that'd be better.
Fair enough.
since I was one before, that it wasn't that I was against the code of conduct, but I felt it was very important that we have a city administrator so that that person could put their input in, because they are the person who's in charge of the city, that I asked for a delay. We've had the delay. Everybody's had time to look at it. We have a city administrator that I think is going to lead us in the right direction. And so I would like to make the motion to pass the code of conduct.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Still there, Julie?
Yes, I.
Okay. All opposed, same sign? All right. Motion carries.
All right, we will update that in the ordinance to reflect that it was adopted tonight. I think that's all I have for my issues. As I'm looking over my list, I think we've talked about all of the things that we needed to give input to. And I'll just note for your discussion for next time, we'll be making those motions to appoint the different commissioner positions. I would just echo that Jeff is correct, you know, that those open meeting laws apply only to meetings. Meetings occur when there is a quorum of you. That can happen at the grocery store. That can happen if you all ride in the same car when you're at a parade, okay? So we are going to make sure we're aware of those things, but I would encourage you to kind of be thinking about that too. It doesn't prohibit you from talking to one of you or, you know, your other commissioners in between meetings. Doesn't prohibit you from talking to Jeff or, you know, however you want to handle that.
But we can't talk to more than two.
Yeah, if you've
at
got
a time.
3 of you in the same room at the same time,
Yeah.
somebody needs to leave.
Yeah, that's very important, because you guys need to be communicating with each other just as much as you need to be communicating with staff and the way you're formulating opinions, positions, and all that stuff. So I would really encourage you to reach out to each other, bounce ideas off each other before you bring it to the council or to the staff.
The key is that we don't have meetings outside of the public where we're making determinations, where we're deliberating on things, you know, so those are just things to avoid. And we'll, again, have more training on open meetings to review all of those points as we go forward, probably here in the next month.
Okay. One more item. There's 3 more tax abatement applications that came in. I don't know how many. Do you know how many we've had total, Amy?
I don't know how many we had total.
Okay,
No.
but there's 3 new ones. Let's see. Looks like a total city
North Sioux City's
cost of $990. So, we had a lot more earlier, I'm assuming.
We did, yeah.
Okay.
This is the 3rd time we've had them, and there's no deadline on them, so we could continue to have them too.
Okay, and then they need, we'll need to do a motion on this.
Again, all this is calculated by the county. And the applications are due to the damage. They were damaged during the flood, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Cool. I'll make a motion that we accept the new abatements.
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. And do we have to have a motion for adjournment?
Yes, you do.
Oh, boy, who wants to do that?
So moved.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Okay, there's a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Gonna use that.